What is
Where? I don't know where.
That's over at the Donner Pass.
Oh, yeah.
They got the big blizzard over
yeah.
there.
that? Thank you, Amy.
All right. Good morning. I'd like to call the Public Services and Facilities Committee meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Election of chair and vice chair. I think we already did that.
We did, and that, I'm sorry, I used the January
Okay.
agenda for,
I was wondering.
As a
I
starting
assumed
point.
I assumed it was a typo.
yes.
Citizens' comments. We have any?
No, no, ma'am.
All right. Approval of the previous meeting minutes. Motion to approve.
So moved.
And I guess we do have a quorum. Yeah.
Yep, you
Yeah,
you have a
two.
quorum.
And let's see, old business.
Did you want to vote on those?
Oh, sorry. Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Parking reconfiguration is on here, but I don't think we have much to discuss, although, where are we on I believe the, sublease or sublease to the, people working on the ditch is supposedly expiring soon, so do we need to address that?
So we have, as y'all know, in early this year, we entered into this agreement with the restaurant to be able to utilize maybe 80% of the employee lot, which is located at the corner of the marina next to the public dock. That agreement expires March 8th. We have received a notification from the marina, from the restaurant tenants, that they are not in a position to extend that past March 8th. As you know, the project is in full swing. The contractor is doing a lot of progress, but we have notified the contractor that March 8th is essentially the deadline for us to be able to utilize that. They are utilizing and moving some of the equipment as they lay it out on the road and on top of the areas that they've already piped. So if we find, there's still gonna be a need of accessing the ditch, what, of course, minimize it so that it's not within their footprint. If we do need to, if the road and the top of the ditch is not enough to accommodate this operation, we'll just move everything to the shared lot, and that'll be available to the contractor, and it's the same area that will need to be available for the public dock when construction starts this month as well. So that's our contingency plan, just using the shared lot if we need to, but as much as we can, keep it on the road, the right-of-way, and on top of the ditch.
But, so that part of the ditch is, some of it is covered already, or, oh, okay.
Yes,
So
yes,
we
ma'am.
are,
Kind of halfway down.
so
maybe
we are
halfway down the
moving
ditch.
landward,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we are moving landward, or away
We're-
from the waterway,
We're
right?
actually going towards the waterway.
Oh,
We're going
okay.
from
They started
waterway-
at the intersection of Waterway, and they're roughly maybe by the end of where the road is, and then they'll
Yeah.
keep going all the way
Oh,
to the
okay.
So,
Waterway.
yeah, moving, I guess we're saying waterway, but moving from Waterway Boulevard towards the
Correct.
Intracoastal Waterway.
Okay.
So that's kind of, that's our contingency plan. I know the marina operator has offered to accommodate both the restaurant employees and the city as much as, we need. So we're hopeful that we won't need it, but after March 8th, we'll just have no choice but to take over the shared lot.
Okay. All right, anything else on
Well,
that?
where are we with the restaurant? Last meeting, I think said they had not been able to look at the plan yet as far as the parking.
Yes, the plan, so in January, we approved or allowed them to work directly with Matt Klein on a revised layout based on their input and based on their needs, if you will. They did that for a couple times, so Matt Klein developed two different layouts. The last one that they worked on with, the last one, I hate being my back on the, y'all will protect me, right? Something's coming behind me. Douglas didn't even notice. He didn't flinch.
Don't count on me to.
So the last plan they worked on was the one we included in the packet last month. We haven't heard feedback from them on it yet. I know Matt Klein has reached out to them a couple of times, just making sure that there was nothing else they wanted to include in his layout. So I don't think he's heard back since either. So we don't know.
So the ball's in their court.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And one other thing, I'm gonna try and sneak in under old business. Because I didn't feel like I got a really good answer at the last meeting from the engineer. So I'll just throw it out there one more time for y'all, that if this makes any sense. I guarantee you the two 42-inch pipes are a little bit over-engineered, and we wouldn't have to tear up the road from waterway all the way down to the waterway again to put in the affluent pipe if we just put that affluent pipe in the drainage line. Keep it piped and run that pipe all the way down to the waterway, just do it inside the 42-inch pipe. I've now said my piece, but it seems like that would make our lives a whole lot easier, and it would be less expensive, and you'd be able to maintain it if it was inside that pipe. And I've seen this done before, where one pipe is run inside another pipe, and I don't see why that would be a problem, but anyway.
So Blair, I don't know how so I do think, I mean, that was an interesting idea. I've never heard of that or seen that. And I think I could see the kind of smoke coming out of, kind of blowing the engineer's mind.
The engineer's like, ooh.
Just didn't sit well. I could tell it just kind of didn't sit well.
Yeah.
And I guess my kind of curiosity would be if there was a break inside of the effluent line, which is what they want to protect, would
Right.
you have to then dig up? Would you have to break in? I think you'd have to break into our drainage line
Not
to get.
necessarily, because
or-
it's a big enough pipe, and the affluent pipe's the one that's big around. So it would be.
You'd either be
you could go-
working.
You could go down in there and patch it without any problem. And you wouldn't have to tear anything up. But the big thing is, we're gonna have this pretty area, hopefully very soon, and then come fall, we're gonna dig it all up again. It's like, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to bury
Well,
an 18-inch pipe.
I do not think that I do think that we have anticipated needing to repave the portion of the road.
Yeah.
Well, and they obviously are gonna need to do it because it's their project, but we are intentionally not going to completely finalize the area that we know that effluent line is
Yeah.
going. It's gonna be kind of gravel, old pavement. There are patches where we're crossing that we're gonna have to do, but we are not gonna have it in kind of showroom condition, and then they come and do this. We're intentionally leaving it kind of as is as much as possible, because we know that their project is gonna take up the entire asphalt
Right.
in that area, so.
And if I recall Mark Yodis's presentation, I think the biggest roadblock for something like that would be permitting, whether or not the regulatory agencies would permit. As creative as it is,
No,
and maybe
I
makes
understand,
sense.
and what his original answer to me, the first time I raised this was, well, you can't put affluent into the pipe, and so it's like, no, we're running the
through a different pipe.
through
Yeah.
the pipe.
He said
It's
we
all-
can't mix it, which
can't
Blair's plan wasn't mixing it.
No,
Yeah.
it's still, it's mixing, but it's in the waterway, as.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
as
As
it will
goofy as
be,
that
as it will
sounds.
be anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I'm now done.
I think it was just too outside the box for
Yeah.
Too
an engineer
creative,
thought.
It just might be helpful to sit down with them one-on-one and go, okay, let's
yeah.
Yeah,
think this through.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, it's sadly, as reasonable as that might be, it just might not be
Might not be, I know.
doable in their world. All right, so, new business?
Yes.
Fiscal year 25 budget for Public Works Department?
All right, we'll get started with Public Works. I've provided a expenditure detail for all funds for both Public Works and Recreation, and we'll get started with the general fund. The increase in the general fund for the Public Works Department compared to FY '24 is really driven by increases in payroll, health insurance, general property and general liability and property insurance, and vehicle maintenance. And then we'll talk a little bit about capital projects that we have planned for FY '25. But I did want to mention, and I'll sound like a broken record by the time we go through every department, but health insurance has increased 11.8%. We expect an experience modifier, and that's really based on the number of claims that we've had over the year, to be, we expect to be notified by PBA this month. For example, last year, our experience modifier was 3.8, so we anticipate something similar from health insurance. So there's just a little bit of an expense that's not contemplated in the budget yet until we get that experience modifier. But we do have an 11.8 increase. It applies to anybody who participates in the program.
So that's not related to the experience modifier? So
No.
That's not gonna go down?
Correct.
That's gonna stay?
Correct.
And then it could go up another 3.8%?
Well, that was our experience
Last year it
modifier
was.
last year, but whatever that experience modifier increase will need to be added to the amount that we have in the budget today. Overall insurance has increased about 25% for the city, including, general liability, property liability, and they're mostly due to rates and exposure. Payroll has increased about 19%. Property values has increased 6%, equipment increased 6%, and the vehicle value. So as we get new people or we increase payroll, that inevitably will increase insurance rates as well. And as we get newer equipment and we make improvements, the value of those, of that equipment and and that property will go up. So we'll see that across every department, just increases in those lines. From the general fund budget for Public Works, really the significant addition to the budget includes uniforms, just showing increase in expenditure, increase in the cost of boots and just getting new uniforms for our folks. And then you'll see in line 38, garbage cart procurement, we have a provision of $100,000, and we talked about this last month. We're looking at phasing in a new, preparing for us having to move to a side loader operation. That'll require new carts, everybody to have the same cart. So even though when we replace the old ones, we replace them with a new cart, we need to make sure that that's done across the island. So we're just thinking first phase would happen in FY25, and that's for the $100,000.
And if you request a new cart now, you're getting the new one, right?
Well,
Like if my cart breaks, which it's broken, but just out of curiosity.
so, right now, a broken cart, some of them can be repaired. If it can't be repaired, it'll be replaced with the new Toter brand.
That's the
Which is
blacktop.
Correct, which is the style that has to have the side loading operation.
And who pays for it if it's broken?
City pays for it. A new one
Or an additional one.
or an
because you
additional
want, like, a pretty
one,
one.
then it's a cost to the homeowner.
And it's $75. Any questions on our general fund?
Mine's limping along.
So then we'll go to capital projects.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Briefly on the vehicle maintenance.
Yes.
I think 6 or 8 months ago, I reported the IT-14G or the loader operation. That motor went out in the older machine, which took 50% of this budget. That's why we were way over. And I reported that to the committee back then. Just wanted to be clear that we have added 3 additional apparatus. So going forward, we just gonna have to consider adjusting that vehicle maintenance to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, as we add vehicles to our fleet and they get older, we'll just have to anticipate a higher cost in vehicle maintenance, and that's a little bit of what we've been seeing, and part of the reason we increased that line item to account for that.
And just to be clear, the 3 apparatus, council gave us the opportunity to keep the old cat loader, which has been paid for itself already. But the other two pieces of added apparatus is the jet vac and the stormwater vehicle. So as we're building this stormwater division, those apparatus, and certainly Robert and Linton had, that jet vac has paid for itself 3 times over already.
Under just the general forecast from 26 forward, there's not much of an increase year over year. Are we taking into account population growth? Or is that something we'll have to look at at a later date?
No, I've never adjusted it for population.
No.
We may grow up, we're not growing out.
No, but the long-term trend has been for more permanent residents. And so if that continues, I would think that would generate more trash. I don't know if that's true or not.
I would say, in my opinion, a full-time resident would generate less garbage.
Okay, fair enough.
Because they're not throwing everything away on Sunday, Saturday, whatever.
Correct.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, during season. But I guess it would then normalize over
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah, you can look at the
Okay,
dashboard, and I think my dashboard's available. You can see the trend and how we forecast.
You can hear us?
okay. All right.
Scott?
Thank you.
Cannot hear us.
we can see you.
He's not muted.
I think it went then.
No, it's giving its little.
I got it. I got it.
There we
You
go.
got it?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry about the disconnect.
Thank you.
It's early over there, Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
All right, we'll move on to Capital Projects Fund. Scott, we are reviewing the Public Works Department budget, and we just reviewed the general fund expenditures, and we're now on page 3 of the meeting packet, Capital Projects Fund. So in the Capital Projects Fund, we have 2 major drainage projects that we are planning for FY '25. I'm sorry, yes, FY '25 budget. And that includes the design and construction of our next drainage improvement project on Palm Boulevard between 37th, 38th, and 41st. We anticipate funding that project with half of the ARP funds that the city received a couple of years ago. The other half, as you know, is being used for the public dock project. And then supplementing that with $1 million that we received last year from the state for drainage improvement projects. We also rebudgeted the expenditure for the Waterway Boulevard multi-use path. As you all know, that's a project that we're waiting on a FEMA hazard mitigation grant. We anticipate receiving a notice from FEMA this quarter. I check in almost weekly with them. We haven't heard anything back. But that project is in FY '24, we're estimating the project to cost $1.1 million, and that is the amount that we submitted in the grant application. Since then, we've been working with our engineers to add a couple of things to that scope. One is to include drainage infrastructure between 21st and 23rd on Waterway. That's an area we saw significant flooding during the last storm in December, that nor'easter. And notice that we have a deficiency in drainage infrastructure there that it would make sense for us to incorporate as part of that project. So that's why the cost there has increased from 1.1 to 1.5. We have asked Thomas and Hutton to come to the next council workshop this month to talk about the design of the elevation to the Waterway Boulevard path. Right now, that project has been designed to provide protection to up to 6 feet NAVD. And when you look at the comparison of what that would look like compared to a storm like the one we had in December, we went back to the drawing board and asked them to evaluate if there's an opportunity to design it to provide even a higher level of protection, maybe evaluate a 6.5 protection and even 7. So doing that will significantly increase the cost, but I think it's a good conversation for us to have and decide the benefit of redoing or increasing the protection capacity of that project versus the cost. And the feasibility. There may be areas that it's just not feasible for us to increase the level of protection. But that's an exercise we've asked them to do, and we'll be, having that conversation with council next week. No, the following week
That's a
on the
great
workshop.
question. How much revenue are we expecting or grant to cover this? Was there grant money?
So the grant is a 90% grant funded and 10% the local cost share. And when we submitted the grant, the cost estimate that was used was $1.1 million for that project. So if the cost increased, then that's going to increase the city's share for that. The city would have to cover that share.
Is
You
it,
muted yourself, Scott.
So we'd be expected to cover about 600,000 right now of this particular, at the $1.5 million level roughly.
Yes, sir.
is Wild Dunes involved in this project at all? I'm just thinking about the proximity to the golf. I mean, it
believe-
goes along the golf course mostly.
It does, and I do recall there's 2 areas that we would need easements from them for.
Okay,
That's correct.
but they are aware of it and it's, okay.
They are.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So under capital outlay, capital projects fund, capital outlay, we also included the purchase of a mini excavator for $50,000. This was something that we requested last year, and rather than purchasing it last year, we decided to rent one. I think that back to Donna's point of us trying to build this in-house drainage division, and hiring somebody that is equipped to operate this machinery and really do a lot of really good work around the island, we feel like we would benefit with having our own piece of equipment. The plan would be to purchase one that's used, that is in good condition, and start there. So that's why we're requesting a provision of $50,000 to cover that.
How much was the rent on it this year?
You remember?
No, but I will tell you that our rents and leases budget was depleted by the IT 14G going down, and we had to rent. So in the budget, we had money set aside for the small mini excavator. But when the cat went down, we had to rent one, and we used that budget money. And then Robert did a project installing the valves at 4th Avenue with the rental of the mini excavator. You remember what the cost was, Robert?
Yeah, I think for that project, it was 5,000 all in with the mini excavator. We're gonna need to rent it again for 2 more tide valves that we have coming up this year, so this budget. So we will be, I think, increase that by another maybe 2,500 for the rental. Yeah, and this.
So you could pay for it in a few rentals.
Yeah, and
is what you're
so
saying.
just to what Desiree said, we already, myself and Lenton, are both operators on the machine, so it wouldn't require another person to be hired on to use that apparatus, so.
And part of our plan this year is, as you all know, we have a maintenance agreement for ditches and restructuring and cleaning out the ditches. We want to reevaluate that. Now that we have in-house capabilities, I want to make sure that we are maximizing the use and the equipment that we don't have by using this contractor. But there may be some things that we are capable of doing in-house at a lower cost, and just redesigning that whole maintenance contract. So that's something that we plan on doing this year with Public Works. The other addition I wanted to highlight under the municipal accommodations tax, that's the maintenance and service contract. There's a $15,000 increase there, and that's really a new provision for us to patch city-owned roads. There are roads that are not SCDOT owned or maintained, and we have received multiple requests from residents wanting to patch, holes on the road and, that's something that we could manage, but we don't have a provision in our budget to allow for that. It was basically just waited until SCDOT, but there's just some roads that they are not going to maintain because they're not in their system. So this would allow us to do that. We did some work this year on, was it in a
So we have,
Forest Trail.
Forest Trail? We
Yeah,
did that on Forest Trail, and we kind of coupled a little bit of maintenance and miscellaneous money together to make that happen. But we'd like to have an ongoing provision to allow for that, for us to be allowed to do that.
And can we do that in-house, or do we have to is someone else doing that work?
Yeah, we have to
We do.
subcontract
Yes.
that out,
That's what
yeah.
I thought.
So I've actually gotten prices from several subcontractors, and the one we just got now recently is very reasonable, so that's kind of why we moved away. Some of the prices we had were just,
Is there a way to do that in-house? I mean, I feel like so much of what we wait on is, because from what I heard from like the Forest Trail stuff, is that it's a hole it's a 2-foot hole, and nobody wants to bring all their stuff out here for.
yeah, and that is the challenge, that they won't do anything that's really small.
Right.
But to have that kind of machinery, yeah, you could go throw like cold patch in a hole, but it doesn't
Right, it
stay.
doesn't
You have
stay.
to cut it out and patch in correctly, or else you just end up with a bigger mess in the
Yeah,
end,
yeah.
actually.
I think to be efficient and smart in how we do that, I asked the county to do an assessment of all of our roads that are not SCDOT owned. So we'll have a schedule, and we'll be able to maximize and just have the contractor here maybe do a few, not just fill one hole, but take care of everything that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, and that's, I'll generally wait if there's a couple projects, and that's really the way you get them out here,
Yeah.
that they can do that.
All right, we'll go to hospitality tax. We've included, under maintenance and service contracts, a $40,000 provision to assist with rec department landscaping. So we have a grounds supervisor. With everything that they have going on, we felt like it would be a good use of time for our landscaping company to take care of some of the areas around the building and the grounds except the fields. And we tried that last year when we were short-staffed in the recreation department, and it's really worked really well, and it has helped provide additional, what we call manufacturer time for these folks to assist in other needs.
Correct.
And then under contracted services, there is an increase there, and that it's mainly due to the increase of the commercial dumpster service. We have increased the frequency of collection, particularly at Front Beach. The city pays for the collection fee, the businesses pay for their user fee directly from the county, but that includes all of the dumpsters that are on the island. And as y'all know, last year we began transitioning some of the condos in Waldoons from individual garbage cans that took a long time for our public works personnel to service, and transitioning them to a commercial compactor dumpster that is then covered by this contract. So there's a $12,000 increase to account for that. And the frequency and collection down at Front Beach was really necessary with just the activity that we have there. And we were finding ourselves, being completely full by Saturday on a long weekend. And it just was not feasible to continue with the old schedule.
So even though that's an increase, it's kind of maybe a shifting, if we're being more efficient in another area.
So
Right.
two things. The traditional restaurant compactor, the city compactor, that was a once per week, every Thursday. I think COVID, although it brought in more revenue for those restaurants, it also doubled the capacity for the garbage. I spoke with the administrator, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago, that we had to go to twice per week. And even 2 weeks ago, the contractor failed to service that compactor on a Friday. Saturday, night, Sunday morning at 4 o'clock, I get a phone call from the Windjammer that it's already overflowing. So it's requiring, based on the expansion of all these restaurants, and that does not include Acme, they have their own, the twice per week service for that compactor. So we were almost at capacity at the once a week prior to the expansion and the outdoor type seating areas that occurred during COVID. So I think that's why it's requiring the twice per week. Also, keep in mind that we are transitioning in these condos away from the single-family cans. Right now, we're in the process of doing the second half of Mariners Walk. We've just completed Seagrove. We have 3 more complexes to remove the single families and convert it over. But it will be an efficiency issue and for the Public Works that as these houses grow up, the amount of temp labor and all it requires could be affected in a positive way for us, because if we go to commercial dumpsters, then we may not need the 10 type employees in the season.
And then the other addition to the contracted services line item includes the CARTA shuttle contribution that the city has funded for the past couple of years. That cost has increased from $8,000 to $10,000, and it was my bad. We did not include that $8,000 provision in FY24. So we're covering that under the existing line item, which will be a little bit over budget. But we made sure that FY25 includes a specific allocation for that initiative. The town of Mount Pleasant is planning to continue to support that, as well as CARTA, so we want to plan to make sure we keep it for next season. And then the last fund is the state accommodations tax. The addition or the difference or change from last year is a higher share of a third of the cost of the Waterway Boulevard project. We're funding that 2/3 with capital projects and 1/3 with that tourism fund. All right, that is all for Public Works. Any other questions?
Scott?
I have one, Desiree, just in general, I'm sorry, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, no, I was just making sure we heard you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just in general, I know this is sort of a universal question, we're kind of challenged with the cost increases across the board, and I know maybe at the workshop we're gonna get on the topic, but are we seeing corresponding revenue projection increases to cover these increases in costs as well in all these different buckets? Do you forecast these to cover these increases?
No. The reality is, we are not seeing a corresponding increase in revenues. We are working on our revenue projections, and we are seeing some accounts that are not performing as we forecasted last year for FY24. We do know that some of these big pieces, the biggest sources of funding for the city are renewals and permits and licenses, and we're approaching the renewal season, so we're hopeful that we'll see increases there. But so far, when we're looking at our 12-month actuals, there are some revenue sources that are not performing as they have in the past. So that's something that we need to take care of.
Yeah, so our options will then be to dip into the fund balances or go out and finance these projects?
Either finance, increase revenues, or make some adjustments to our expenditures, yes. You're welcome. All right, so now we'll review the Recreation Department budget. Again, mainly the increases in the operational expense are due to payroll, health insurance, and general property liability. Scott, I mentioned this when we discussed the general fund expenditures for Public Works. Our health insurance has increased 11.8%. That does not include our experience modifier that we anticipate receiving this month. Last year it was 3.8 in addition to the overall increase that we received from PIBA.
You get that good news at the meeting.
Yes,
cost increase?
it's good news and bad news. The good news is there's no increases for the employee side on health insurance. All the increases are on the employer side. But I did want to mention that I did not mention it earlier. And then insurance rates, Scott, too, we're seeing a 25% increase. It's mainly due to rates and exposure. Increases in payroll, the value of our equipment, and the value of our property going up. We're seeing that impacting our insurance rates too. We are working with SMRF, which is our provider from the Municipal Association, to evaluate whether or not we want to consider increasing our deductible and how that would impact our premiums, and just do an analysis of where we are in terms of claims and how that would look like if we change our current structure. But we're looking into that as a potential option to manage some of those cost increases.
Are there any instances or possibilities on some very low risk or old assets where we might determine that it's best to self-insure or assume some risk to do that? I mean, I don't know what the portfolio looks like in detail, but
So that'll be,
that's something.
yeah, that'll be part of what we'll evaluate, yeah. All right, very small increases to themed activities, adult sports and youth sports, and that's basically due to us wanting to provide additional programming for toddlers and kids, and increasing the rates of our umpires and cost of equipment for youth and adult sports. Really, for the rec department, there's really only one big piece that is included in FY '25, and that is the replacement of the large playground equipment, and shifting from mulch around that playground equipment to a pour and play, that hopefully from a maintenance perspective will reduce in some cost savings over time. And just aesthetically, I think it certainly looks a lot better. And we won't lose it every time it floods,
That would be nice.
which is a good one. So maintenance and service contracts, I know that the version you have does not include the note, but I did want to point out that maintenance and service contract, $116,000, includes our provision for facilities maintenance. For every city facility, we budget 1% of the insured value. But for the rec center, we've been budgeting 0.5%, just because they have dedicated facilities and maintenance staff, and they do a better job at keeping up with all of that. For the forecast, though, we are forecasting 1% starting in FY '27. And then this also includes a provision of $50,000, which you saw in the 10-year capital plan when we discussed that last month, for painting the building in FY '25. Under capital outlay, we have a third of the cost of the playground, the new playground, and the pour and play flooring. We're covering that, as you know, in this first draft of the budget, a third from capital projects, which is general fund money, a third from the municipal accommodations tax, and a third from the state accommodations tax. So split, which is pretty typical, split what we do when we make improvements to the rec building, knowing that that facility is used by people who stay for a week and just vacation here. And then a $32,000, I'm still on capital projects under capital outlay. That $263,000 also includes the replacement of the floor in the high tide room, which hasn't been done. Under the municipal accommodations tax fund, capital outlay, we have $207,000 there, and that includes, like I said, a third of the cost of the playground replacement and pour and play, and the replacement of the recreation department truck for $40,000. State aid tax, all we have budgeted under capital outlay is a third of the playground replacement. And then everything else did not change from last year. Those are funds to support special activities at event throughout the year.
Desiree, I do have a question.
Yes.
On the last version we looked at, the capital for the rec center, I think was 618,000. And I think there was a question about whether there was a $500,000 line item for, I think, the replacement of the, equipment. But there was 115,000 in the following year, and I think there was a, comment that might have been double budgeted.
It
And
is.
So I was kind of expecting that number to come down, and I think when I total up now, it's at 650, so it's actually increased, if my numbers are right.
You're looking at the FY '26 forecast?
Well, no, I was looking, yeah, there was a $500,000 line item, and then the 115 was in 26, and I think the conversation at the last meeting is that some of the 115 was in the 500, so perhaps it was double budgeted, or some of it might have been.
If it was double budgeted, it would have remained in the FY '26 forecast. We can check into that, but it's not in FY '25. The FY '25 expenditure of 500,000 includes roughly 300,000 for the playground equipment and 150,000 that's for the pour and play. So we'll revise, I know exactly what you're referring to, whether or not the FY '26 forecast number includes that 115, which would have to be eliminated if we do the project in FY '25.
Yeah, you'll be bringing it into 25.
That's right.
Yeah. Is there any uplift in the revenue forecast for the rec center this year? I don't know what that is. I don't know.
We are actually, we are seeing an increase in rec program income. The rec department has been implementing new classes and programs for adults at a higher rate compared to other programs, so we are seeing an uptick there. I did ask Carrie to provide me with a list of all the pricing for every program and every event, sports or any type of programming that they offer, to see if there's any opportunity there to cover some of the expense, some of the increases in just overall costs. We've talked about a lot of this programming that has been in place for many, many years hasn't really changed. The cost to the residents, so that may be something that the council wants to evaluate, adjusting it in some capacity.
So we're still,
And,
we're still
okay.
charging,
Sorry.
basically, for the summer camp, is Summer Shine the same this year as it has been?
Correct.
Are we paying the instructors more?
So instructors don't do that. We have camp counselors
mean,
that would be
the
part-time
counselors.
employees.
But are they more
They're-
expensive this year than they were? in the
They're the
past?
same as they were last year, but I
Okay.
mean.
We did
correct,
increase
we
it
did
last
increase it
year.
last year.
So I feel like we
So-
might need to start thinking about the increased cost being borne by the participants, at least a portion of it. I mean, if it's
Yeah.
costing more to put it on, then it should cost more to go.
Well, summer camp, we talked about that one specifically. It's $85 a week. That's very low
crazy cheap.
compared, and the level of service and the level of programming that we offer is, compared to none. It's just excellent. And I think that may be an opportunity to increase it slightly. I mean, we wouldn't double it, but what is a reasonable fee for residents to pay compared to the service that we're providing and just increased costs overall?
Correct.
So
I've been looking at, I've started looking at Mount Pleasant and City of Charleston. I don't want to compare it to a specialty camp, but another camp that's comparable that a recreation department is providing. So I'm kind of reaching out to those and seeing what they charge for their camp that will be comparable to what we offer.
Anything else?
Is it possible to price out what it would cost to keep the center open 7 days a week? Is that something that we've looked into or could look into?
What do you mean? Like what the cost would be if the city were to open on Sundays, which is the
Yes.
only,
Is that-
okay.
Is that a temporary employee that would be required to be there, or I'm just wondering, it would be nice to know what that number is.
Is
I
it
do
still
get
a
asked
staffing
questions
issue?
It would be a temporary or a full-time. I mean,
But the last time we had this conversation, we were actively trying to get some people to work Sundays, and that was the holdup. Is that still
Correct.
where we are?
we have a good group of part-time employees now, so it's something that we can look at.
Yeah, at the time when we discussed it, we were not only short on part-time, but we were short, I think, 2 full-time employees. So
Correct.
everybody was sort of, rallying around it to try to make our normal operations open. But we
happen.
can certainly, whether it would be an availability issue with our current part-time employees, whether it would require an additional part-time employee, we can do that and have that discussion at the next committee meeting.
Yeah, can we do
Yeah,
that?
would that be something we could have at the, I don't know if we could have that, or even broad stroke at the workshop, I think that's coming up before
Sure.
the committee meeting on the 19th.
We'll try. How about that?
Okay, sure.
With,
Yeah.
with health insurance, I'll just throw this out there. I know that Mount Pleasant has now moved to a different type of health insurance where they have in-house doctors. And they've got an office in North Charleston, they have an office in Mount Pleasant. It might be that, I mean, I don't think we're big enough to do what they're doing, but we might be able to contract with them and fold into their system, that there may be some savings there.
Yeah, they went into that model a few years ago. I think the last time we discussed that as a possibility, they hadn't been in place for as long, and so it gave us a little bit of pause of transitioning, but maybe now is a good time to evaluate how it's worked and whether there's an opportunity for us to partner.
I
and-
know they have extra capacity. right
Yes,
now. I
for
know
sure.
that. Okay.
Thank you. We
Can I-
sure.
That's why my wife's still working. She works for Mount Pleasant.
Okay,
So I have their doctors.
So she
And
likes
it's- I absolutely love it.
okay, super.
All right, anything else?
Motion to
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
adjourn, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Or, we,